I'm pressing go live.
Go live.
And then it says going live. And then it says you're live. So
Yay, we're live.
hello, welcome to Dulcimoon Talk number 33. I'm Erin Mae, and I'm super excited to be joined today by Michele Gourley, who is currently living in New York City,
Mhm.
and has lived in a variety of places and taken the dulcimer with her all along the path and the journey. And so Michele and I met at Kentucky Music Week, I think, when you came down just for like a jam or something. And Steven Seifert said, "Hey, you two need to meet each other." um, but we really got to connect one year when I flew out for the Black Mountain Music Festival and I flew into Raleigh, Durham, which is where you were living at that time. And then we carpooled to the festival. We went antique storing together. We played together in the concert. And then the next fall, you came out to Kansas for the National Mountain Dulcimer Competition, and I got to pick you up from the airport, and we carpooled to the festival. So we've had a couple of good adventures in getting to and from dulcimer festivals together. So
For sure.
great to have you here. Thank you for taking some time out of your life schedule, which is very full of all kinds of different things right now. Um, so we tend to like to just start with like, how did you get into the mountain dulcimer? How were you introduced to this instrument? How did it find you or you found it? What's your path like?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Erin. I think the answer to that question, like a lot of people, it's fate or providence, depending on your worldview. But it was, gosh, do I want to say it's been a while? But I was at that time living in Johnson City, Tennessee. I just finished first round of grad school and didn't really know what I was doing with my life. And was hanging out with a friend I knew from contra dancing that summer who was a caretaker for this kind of campground just outside of Asheville. And he taught flatfoot dance lessons to people. And I had signed up for the Warren Wilson, like old time music week, one of their weeks, the following week, and signed up for a variety of classes, not dulcimer at the time. I had no idea what a mountain dulcimer was.
Hmm.
But he had a couple come to take lessons from him that afternoon, and we both realized we were going to Swananoa the next week. And out of the blue, the wife was like, "Hey, I have this dulcimer, but I'm going to really be studying fiddle this week, so you should borrow it and take lessons from this guy named Don Petty." And I was kind of like, what are you talking about? And who is this? But I was like, free instrument, okay, whatever. So I borrowed her instrument and took lessons from Don Petty for a week, and that was my, I guess, gateway into this wonderful world.
Yeah. You had a percussion background before that, right?
Correct. So I studied all kinds of percussion all through high school with a focus on mallet percussion and minored in music in college, mostly classical and jazz, and then was playing in a community orchestra at about the time I discovered the dulcimer. So yeah, my background was percussion and not stringed instruments.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So you were sort of thrown into the dulcimer world under the tutelage of Don Petty. What did it feel like? What was the experience like for you?
It was great. Like Don is a really wonderful teacher and he brings these really obscure, fun old time tunes. And so it was just a super approachable experience, which was great because I'm like looking down at the instrument and I was like, what is this fretting thing? And what do I do with this pick thing? And I'm doing this. Yeah, it was very foreign to like strum across three strings and like try to fret and like put it all together at the same time.
Don Petty is one of those teachers who doesn't get too concerned about the name of the notes or the fret position or whatever. He just kind of says, here's what the song sounds like. See if you can find it in your instrument too. So I imagine that was for someone who had a musical background but not a dulcimer specific background, kind of a fun approach to it as opposed to the like, okay, now this is what you do technically, and this is what you do technically, and this is what you do technically. You just got to jump into the music.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
because we weren't talking about chords. It was just let's stay on the melody string, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's like I can do that one string.
So you were introduced to the dulcimer by borrowing an instrument.
hmm
When did you decide you had to have one for yourself?
Afterwards, but I was in a big transition where I was about to move back home to Nashville after, oh gosh, a long time. So it took me till about the following spring to get an instrument, and I ordered a McSpadden dulcimer, I think right around my birthday in March. So yeah, I was with Dawn in July, loved it, and then didn't really get settled into the new place and get an instrument until March.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Good. So, tell us kind of a little bit about like how the dulcimer for you has been sort of the accompaniment to all of the things that you do, it seems like, kind of along the way. So I'm just interested in knowing a little bit about like, um, what is your life path looked like? I know you've done a lot of different things, but I don't know. I'm always every time I get to talk to you, I feel really fascinated about the way different threads sort of connect and reconnect in different places. And it is like in your life, you start in a direction and then something happens and it moves you in this other direction, but then you come back around to that thing. So I don't know. Tell us whatever parts of that story you want to. But how did you get from Johnson City, Tennessee, finding a dulcimer to New York City now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I had a friend once, when I was on like a summer trip to Honduras, tell me to make plans and plan for God to change them. And I feel like that's been kind of my life story. So I was in Johnson City because I went to med school because I thought I was going to go work overseas for a certain group, and that kind of all fell apart. I had had an ankle surgery, so I had to take some time off after med school, and then was also kind of falling out of love with the idea of kind of Western medicine, modern healthcare, having been a patient and realizing it wasn't quite living up to everything I was being told that it was. So I was
Mhm.
kind of in this existential crisis, like, what do I do? Where do I go? And I knew residency was also a really demanding process. So I was just like putting on the brakes, letting myself heal, find the dulcimer that summer. In the meantime, my friend offers me a job with the state of Tennessee writing their health plan, which is not an insurance document. It was a document to kind of coordinate all the activities of the department so the state and everyone there could be healthier. Honestly, I thought I was going to go down there for 6 months, write this document, and then take off on I don't know what the next adventure was. But
Mhm.
I ended up there for 6 years, 2 years in health planning and policy, and then they opened up a position for director of faith-based initiatives with the health department. And it just sounded too good to pass up. So I spent about 4 years directing this faith-based initiative for the health department and traveling all over the state. And we had whole person health programs and people from different faith and ethnic and demographic backgrounds doing things like teaching their uh, congregations or groups how to use their breath to decrease stress. And it was great. Um, and then during that time, I got my dulcimer, and I took some lessons with through Blair School of Music there at Vanderbilt with Lee Rowe. I think I took
Mhm.
a few lessons with Steve Seifert. I think I also just kind of piddled around and went to a few festivals and tried things on my own. I kind of got sucked into the old time music and dance scene in Nashville, which is a really interesting place to be because you have this really high caliber of musicians there, most of them professional. And here I am with like my really obscure folk instrument I just started learning how to play with a 28-inch fretboard, which I found out to be quite a challenge for my small hands.
That's a long one. Yeah,
Yeah.
those early McSpaddens and really even some of the recent ones that are built in that traditional layout, they are long.
hmm
Yep.
But yeah,
And
but
those are the things you don't know when you're buying your first dulcimer, right? You do
no,
not know the length of what is the VSL and how does it change my life?
exactly. Um, but yeah, so, and the dulcimer just kind of found its way to a lot of down there. I don't know if it's still true, but when I was in Nashville, there was always like kind of picking parties. Well, people would have friends over and everyone would bring their instrument, and afterwards you're sitting around with a lot of different people, and that's how I made friends with a lot of people in Nashville, is just going to these parties. And so I start bringing my instrument along, playing out a little bit, but like I said, it's a really interesting place to get a start on an instrument just because the level of musicianship and the demand for gigs and such, supply and demands are really tight down there.
Mhm.
But then my dream job starts to kind of come to a close for various reasons, and Duke starts this program in theology, medicine, and culture. And I was like, hey, I could take a couple years and study all these things I'm interested in all at once. So I moved to Durham, North Carolina, and spent 2 years at Duke studying the relationship between faith and health and theology, but also got to take some really cool classes. I took one on the theology of place. I took one on the theology of music with Jeremy Begbie. I highly recommend looking him up, even if you're not a religious or spiritual person, because he just has some really interesting thoughts about music. Things like in improvisation, we learned that there's really no mistake you can't correct into something meaningful or beautiful. It's only a half step away. And
Mm.
he
Oh,
taught
that's
us,
lovely. It's
yeah,
only a half step away. It's not even a whole step.
it's not a mistake. It's just like a little detour to getting someplace more interesting.
Hmm.
And he taught us also that to not see time always as linear. He's like, you wouldn't ever condense a 22-minute movement in a symphony down to 3 minutes to play on your radio as a pop song, because
Hmm.
it would lose a lot of its character. And to really think about time more as tension and release, and holding space for the fact that some things in life are more that 22-minute symphony movement, and some things are the 3 minute. And sometimes there's a lot of detours and tension and interesting chord progressions to get to that final place. And that's okay.
Interesting. Yeah. I was in like a creativity summit Zoom thing at the beginning of this year with a lot of songwriters. Um, and I don't even know exactly how I found my way into it because I don't primarily identify as a songwriter, but I'm always looking for sort of tools for creativity. And one of the things that came out of that for me was this recognition that when we are playing music or creating something, one of the things that can happen, it doesn't always, but can happen, is a total sense of timelessness, where that, like, how long was that symphony? We have no sense of that because it's just the length of time we need to be immersed in the story of whatever we're hearing or creating. And I think that's one of the only places in my life where I can like sit down and make music and have no idea how long it's been. And I find that really beautiful.
Yeah, it can really
So,
provide that kind of transcend time.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting that you're bringing that out of as one of the highlights of that time thing.
Sure.
Yeah. And so you got some classes anyway that incorporated like music and medicine and theology.
Yes.
Um, what were you doing with your dulcimer while you were in Durham?
It was slowly peeking its little head out and making some appearances. I did a final project for that music class on my dulcimer. Actually, I think I got the idea from Erin O'Rourke, so thanks, Erin, for the inspiration. But I took Bylum Cabbage and like created some variations in the major key version,
Hmm.
um, and then kind of ran it into the ground, playing it as fast as I could. And then it just all falls apart because you can't go but so fast. And then I did switched up, went up the fretboard a little bit and put it in a completely minor version and like
Hmm.
very slow, and then brought it back down the fretboard and kind of went back to the original version, but pulling in these little chord substitutions in minor, with the idea that like that's somehow how sometimes how life happens, that we're given like this is how the song has to be, this is how you have to play it, this is what's perfect, and if you play it faster, that's better. And so you just run with that kind of myth or that storyline until it just you can't, it just falls apart. And so then you're out in kind of this no man's land of minor keyville, and it doesn't make sense. But then when you come back to like where you were, you're always going to have those elements of kind of that minor time, but it can make things more interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and then it can make it yours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. I love that very much.
Just as I'm saying that, I'm like, that's kind of my life story.
Mm,
But
well, all of us have stories that have moments of like, all right, everything is great, and I'm so energized. And then we have moments of like, wow, crash and burn. And then we have moments of like lengthy hard.
mhm,
That's not like a cute hard. It's like you're in it for a little while. And you have to figure out how to like still find beauty in the middle of that time. And when you come out of the times that are lengthy hard and you are back in times of ease, it doesn't feel the same
mhm,
as before you go through the hard things.
for sure.
I think that's, yeah, I think that's life.
We
Resonates
were,
with me anyway.
yeah, you reminded me, we were just talking in the class I'm teaching at the med school on death and dying this week about grief today, and how like the grief never really goes away, but you just find ways to kind of make meaning of it. And
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So you were in Durham for a while.
hmm I was supposed to be there 2 years, ended up there for about four, almost four. So I thought I was gonna, it's one of those like, I'm gonna make this plan, and then no, it gets changed. I thought
Yeah.
I was going to go on into a doctorate of theology program and did not get in. Um, and so it was kind of, but right about the time I got that news, I met a guy and started dating, and he had a band, and so kind of graduated and was like, you know what, I'm just gonna take the summer and hang out with these guys and have fun, and um, did that. And in that process, he started pulling me out or coaxing me out to perform professionally. They had a weekly bluegrass series at this bar there in Raleigh. And so he's let me start sitting in with them some as kind of like a guest artist. Like I would just get up and perform like one or two songs. But that really started building my confidence is like, oh, I can take this instrument out. Oh, I do have something to offer.
Hmm.
And with that culminating over the summer and us playing some duo gigs together, and then even going to Iceland for a week and playing a couple of gigs over there, because that's one of the ways we kind of met and bonded, is we both gone to Iceland before and really loved it. And yeah, so that's kind of was, I think, my stepping stone to really starting to play out and own my identity as a musician with the dulcimer.
Yeah.
But then that fell apart in October. So I don't know how many more months after I graduated from div school, but I was already kind of locked into Durham at the time. And a few months of like, what the heck am I going to do? I just kind of like built the next period of my life around this identity and playing out with these people, and that's all falling apart. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start doing stuff solo. And over time, starting as early as when I lived in Nashville, I would have these songs like come to me. Like I don't consider myself a songwriter. I feel like I'm more like songs show up on the doorstep of my mind, and I take them in like little foster kittens and just kind of nurture them.
Uh-huh.
And what's interesting is right around the time when that whole relationship fell apart and I was like, what's next? There were some songs that had been like half finished for at least 4 or 5 years at that time, and they just kind of finished themselves. And
Mm.
so I met a guy at the MacBook store, or the Apple store, when I was getting my MacBook fixed. He was like, "Yeah, I'm starting a studio up, and for a couple $100 you can come in and I can record some demos for you." So I did that, and then I went to a couple open mics, which led to a couple other little gigs. And before I knew it, pretty much all of, I guess it was like 2019, I was playing these little solo gigs around the Raleigh Durham area, and then had also met a guitar player who was a nurse by day, and his fiance was an oncology resident at the hospital. And so we started playing as a duo too. So yeah, all of a sudden I started having all these gigs to play, and like really started, I feel like, becoming like a dulcimer player and kind of knowing what I was doing and plugging
Yeah.
my instrument into effects pedals, and people were loving it. And yeah, so that's kind of where dulcimer started going while I was in Durham.
Yeah. So 2019 was pretty exciting, and then 2020 was like
It was
crash
another one
for
of those
so
everything
many
falls
of us.
apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you right before the pandemic, you moved to New York City, right?
During. So
You
I went out
did.
to Winfield in 2019 and
Yeah.
took third, which was really fun. First was Grant Olson, and second, I think, was Jeff Hames that year. So,
Yeah. Tell
yeah.
us about the experience of entering the contest. It, how how you sort of navigated that process and how it felt.
Yeah, well, I think it first started with talking to you, going to Black Mountain, and then maybe I think there was a phone call maybe spring of that year, because I kind of hated the idea of competing, because I feel like a
Mhm.
lot of times competitions are you just play your instrument, you play your piece of music really perfectly and really fast. And that can also be really soulless. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so there's a part of me that was jaded. It's like, okay, yeah, I can go to this competition and play, and it's going to be the person who plays the music the fastest and the most perfectly, and they're going to win and whatever. And there may not be any sense of musicality to it at all. But you told me that part of the score for Winfield was based on creativity or like creative interpretation of the music, or that there was at least some element of musicality being considered.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I can do this. It won't just be, at least in theory, based on who plays the fastest and the cleanest.
Hmm.
Picking pieces of music was tough. I was kind of all over the place that summer. And I've kind of somewhat self-taught even to this day, I think, on dulcimer.
Yeah. And you sing a
And
lot with your dulcimer, right?
that's
So
the other thing,
entering a
yeah.
contest where singing is not allowed is a whole other kind of preparation.
Yes, I almost had to like tell myself to tape my mouth shut when I got on stage, because I was
Oh,
so used to just like going up and making some kind of random banter and then starting to sing and play. I was like, I
yeah.
cannot do that. I cannot make a single sound unless it comes out of this instrument. But what did I ended up? Oh yeah, I remember the pieces I played. So two of them were original compositions. One was kind of an old-timey fiddle tune. And I sat with a lot of music that summer because I was like, what four pieces am I gonna take to Winfield? And so I sat with a lot of
Hmm.
fiddle tunes and some dulcimer stuff and considered and tried a lot out. But what seemed to stick was this kind of old-timey fiddle tune I made up, a fingerpick version of Shebeg Shamor, which is a song I can literally listen to for hours, which thankfully I can because I listened to it for hours that summer.
Right.
And then I made this kind of jazz arrangement of this kind of old gospel song called To Canaan's Land, I'm on my way. And
Yeah.
then another just kind of random, almost classical instrumental piece I started working on with a guy I'd played with earlier the year before when we went to Iceland. So
Yeah. Were you nervous?
not so much the first. Oh, that's the other thing. I ended up drawing the first position for both the prelims and the finals, which I actually highly recommend, because then you have no one to compare yourself to or get
Yeah, you
psyched
get
out
it
about.
done with really quickly. You have no time to build up toward the anxious, nervous feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the nerves hit in a little bit the second round, like for the
Hmm.
finals, but
Hmm.
yeah, the first round's like I've never been to Winfield. I don't know what to expect. Expect like I have no preconception as to what's even gonna be here competition wise. So
Yeah. So, for those who may possibly be interested in coming to enter the contest, the national competition, can you describe what the feeling backstage was for you?
yeah, well, the day we competed, it was really rainy, so it was very humid. There was, I think, if I remember right, kind of a tent, and a lot of people like fixated, I think, on little things like are my strings like what's the word? I want to say shiny. That's not the word. Slick enough to can I move my fingers up and down my
Yeah, because it's
strings?
sticky when it's that humid. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did run into that issue. But a lot of people kind of, I feel like, fretting, no pun intended, about like a lot of little things
Uh-huh.
backstage.
Uh-huh.
One reason I'm glad I went first, because then I didn't get caught up in that anxiety.
Yeah.
But then it was pretty chill. Like once you compete, you can go sit out in the audience. It's in kind of this enclosed-ish pavilion space that you might find at like a fairgrounds.
Yeah.
And then backstage for finals was super chill. There was five of us back there. That's when Grant Olson pulls out his, what was it, cardboard styrofoam dulcimer, and we're all like, what is that? What is he gonna do with
Okay.
that?" Um, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty low key. And then I camped with you guys, so
Yeah.
that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think about, if I compare some of the piano recital kind of experiences or even going to fiddle contests with my sister, they were so intense and everybody was really kind of like it was very competitive. It was very much about like finding that perfection, and people were really in their own heads. And my experience at nationals was longer ago, but it just was like, I mean, that was the place I first learned what a noter was, because someone said, "Hey, have you ever tried playing with a noter?" and handed me one backstage. And people are like, "Hey, I haven't met you yet. Who are you? Where are you from? How long have you been playing? Who built your dulcimer?" It was this
Yeah.
very like kindred feeling and a lot of camaraderie, and
Mhm.
not very much at all of the intensity that I certainly experienced around some of the more formal music
Yeah.
performances and competitions.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, through the bluegrass community, I've hung out in some of those scenes, and yeah, there's just kind of this intensity, or like, I gotta get this right. And yeah, everyone there seemed really friendly and chill. And
Because dulcimer people are the best.
yeah, like the best kept secret that no one knows about.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I have some questions I want to come back around to with dulcimer, but I want to let you sort of finish how you got to from Durham to New York City and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so when I was in my last semester of divinity school there at Duke, I decided kind of on a whim and also to fulfill this like field ed project thing I had to fulfill for my program to do an internship in chaplaincy. And I was honestly still like, I don't want to be in healthcare. I want nothing to do with hospitals. But I picked a small 80-bed hospital just outside of Durham in a little town called Hillsborough. It was like newly built, gorgeous, surrounded by woods. I was like, if I have to do this, I'm going to do this in this really beautiful space and like as chill as possible. And I loved it. And but the timing was off to go to residency, which is the next step you have to do to be a board certified chaplain. And I still wasn't sure if I wanted to be in the healthcare system for that long.
Hmm.
And so I had that year, that summer I was with the band and then doing my own thing. And then summer 2019 rolls around and I start thinking, I was like, okay, I probably need to figure out what I'm doing with my life. Even though like the eclectic mixture of careers I had at the time was really fun. So I started looking at chaplain residency programs, and New York was not on my radar. It what I was looking out west. I was even looking to like Alaska, Hawaii, somewhere that was like super fun and adventurous. And I was sending emails to everyone, and no one was writing me back. Or they were sending me like a really generic response. And I was like, this is a profession that prides itself on active listening and empathy. And do I want to go to a program that's not even reading my emails? Probably not.
Uh-huh.
And then I hadn't thought about this, but there's a Dulcimer connection. I was going up to New York to the state to hike some on the Appalachian Trail with some friends for a few days. Was not going to go into New York City. And then on a whim, I had the thought of like, wouldn't it be fun to see if I could get a gig, like while I'm on my way up to New York to hike. And so I reached out to Rockwood Music Hall, which is a reasonably big deal, I guess, and just wrote them as like, hey, I'm going to be in New York these dates. Like, would it be possible to like play? Here's the places I'd played. And they're like, sure, we'll book you for stage three on a Monday night at this time. How many people do you think you can get there? I think I said like 20. I think about four showed up, but they didn't know that. I didn't know that. But yeah, so I ended up in New York City for a couple days, played a gig, um, did my hiking thing, and also had the thought of like, what if I did residency here? It's just a year, but like if I could do like chaplaincy in New York City, I could do it anywhere.
Mhm.
And so sent the same email to all the programs in New York City, and one wrote me back. And the director was like, yeah, let's set up a phone call to chat next week. So we did. It was too early to start the interview or application process, but long story short, interviewed, I think like late November, so 2019, got accepted by the end of the year, was planning, made this lovely plan of what I'm going to do with my time before the program starts in July 2020. And lo and behold, in March, the hospital where I'm supposed to go to in July 2020 becomes ground zero for the COVID pandemic. So that's how I got to New York City.
Yeah. So you've been doing chaplaincy work at that hospital for all these past like almost 4 years now?
Oh, wow, has it been that long? My time like completely warped up here with the pandemic.
No doubt. No
But
doubt.
yeah,
I only know how long it's been because it's what year are we in? Like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I did my residency from July 2020 to July 2021. Ended up randomly being in a movie along the way because they decided they wanted to make a film about chaplains. And yeah, then got hired on as staff chaplain and have been here since then. So
Yeah. So how has music played a part in these last 4 years for you?
I think it's kind of been like this.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes it comes up with my patients. Unfortunately, even though sometimes I was allowed to bring my dulcimer to my chaplaincy work in North Carolina, that hasn't been allowed here. I think one, because we have music therapists on staff and it's a big hospital, and two, because of infection protocols.
Hmm.
But it's definitely something I'm attuned to with my patients. I played a couple little gigs here like the first year or so, and I think it's been more of a kind of step back and reevaluate my relationship with music. I think working in spiritual care has really maybe changed the way I see the world and kind of relate to it emotionally and spiritually. I have ended up writing a few songs as a result of my
Hmm.
chaplaincy. Once again, they just kind of drop in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but also been taking a step back to like reevaluate my relationship with music. One, because I unintentionally started writing this memoir, and two, well, two, I got injured last year, so I had to take time off. But then I think three, underlying all that, it's actually a need to just really reflect on what role is music serving in my life. Because I think being in Nashville for a bit and being around like the bluegrass scene and such, there's this real focus, I feel like, to almost commodify music. Like music is this thing you do perfectly and fast and well,
Hmm.
so you can
Hmm.
get followers online, and so you can get the big gigs, and so you can get paid well for it.
Hmm.
And I think just where I'm at
Kind of
now,
commercial side of the industry.
yeah, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if we didn't have that, then I couldn't get Taylor Swift on my Spotify account or whomever I wanted to listen to, like you were saying when earlier before we started, when you need that music. Um, but at the same time, I think it's a delicate balance of like, am I doing this to put on this image, this kind of performance, or am I doing it from a place of authenticity? Um, and I think looking back, even on like 2019, as fun as it was, and some of my early gigs in 2020, I think it was more that I'm doing this to like fulfill this image or this version of myself I think I should be,
Hmm.
rather than let me just share this joy of this lovely instrument or this lovely concoction of notes or tunes or words or ideas I have with you so we can hold this space for people to just have a moment of joy and meaning.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so I'm really curious because you've spent a lot of your life in sort of the academia space, various different university settings, and graduate programs and having some formal music education as a music minor in your undergrad work. And like that in combination with the like spiritual formation and theology, I am really interested. I think a lot about how to teach folk music and how to help people tap into sort of the creative expression of music and the thing that saw in a Dove chocolate wrapper in high school, that is music touches feelings that words cannot, and the place where language is sometimes really lacking, but so is playing the notes that are written on the page can be really lacking. And how do we cultivate that thing that isn't just the really formal put your finger here, play this note, inside of music education settings and inside of the thing that is the industry? How do we also cultivate that thing that is not the industry?
Mhm.
You've kind of started to touch on that, but I would love as maybe a kind of closing place for us to let you just expound on that a little bit.
Sure, and I hope I won't open up another can of worms. I think it's kind of the same thing I'm wrestling with healthcare and healing, is realizing like our model of healing and medicine comes from kind of this very Western European colonial kind of mindset. And I think a lot of our music education comes from that as well. And so
Mhm.
like in healthcare, we discredit a lot of the traditional forms of healing and ways of living well because they don't fit in that box. And I think alongside of that, we've discredited and kind of diminished some of those folk music traditions because you're not in this like classical like consortium and learning this way and all the to read the notes and the language of the music that these
And
people.
this instrument didn't get adopted by the symphony, and so it's just it's just a peasant instrument, or it's just a poor man's instrument, or it's just a folk instrument, or
Just a
whatever.
simple instrument. Oh, that's cute. You play it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
but that doesn't hold water next to this other instrument. But I think for me, like it's just kind of just like stripping away like those expectations and those limits and just really owning and letting it come through. And I think your body has this, and your soul and spirit and mind have this like wisdom that like they tell you like what you want to play and what you want to be, and just like being okay with that and being okay with letting go of some of those myths and identities that society's placed on us.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you have favorite resources or practices that help you move into that?
Living in New York City is really great for that because you're constantly having to like let people know like where your boundaries are. But besides that, well, this whole book I'm writing on forgiveness, but that's like a whole nother talk, has really been helpful for me and like letting go of things and learning like who I am
Yeah,
and who am I not. Um, I think we've talked about some, just like the artist way. I think
yeah.
that's a really great resource for kind of rekindling who you are creatively without everyone else's baggage.
Hmm. Hmm. Good. Okay, one more question.
Okay.
Are there women who have been really influential on your path?
I think you've been one of them. I mean, I don't think
Oh.
I would have gotten to Winfield without you. Um, in the dulcimer world too, I've been following Sarah Kate Morgan and really just appreciate what she's done with the instrument. And it feels like she's taken a very authentic path and owned her instrument as
Yep,
well.
yep.
Um, and then outside the dulcimer world, there's a Facebook group I'm part of called Nashville Music Women that's been really supportive and a place to just like come with ideas or suggestions or acknowledge like what does it mean to be a woman in this, I hate to use the term industry, but music industry.
Yeah.
And then there's likewise in the bluegrass community, there's a group called the, why am I blanking on their names? It's this, I think it's the Handsome Ladies, but they organize women only music jams and we're dulcimer friendly. And they have them in different cities around the country. And it was just kind of, yeah, nice to go be with other women musicians.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think that we all learn and grow from each other, and there is something different about the way women walk through the world, the
Mhm.
way we are socialized in our communities, and the way we land on musical expression in different ways that is interesting to me.
For sure.
Yeah. So, okay. Did I miss anything you really wanted to say?
I think that's all. I mean, like I said, I could talk about some of these topics for a whole nother
Okay.
hour, but I
I
know we're at a
know.
time
I
boundary.
adore having tea or sushi or just sitting and playing music with you for hours and hours and hours. And I hope
Yes.
that we get the opportunity to do that again. We haven't seen each other since this whole
I know,
pandemic.
I was about to say, like, it's been a while. We should get together sometime.
Yeah, we will make that happen sometime soon. I really hope so. We even had conversations about trying to go to Iceland together, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
that did not happen. But maybe someday, maybe we'll resurrect that and we'll go hang out in Iceland together.
There we go. It's still there, and there's still some cool musicians over there.
That's right. What an adventure that would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well, I'm gonna let you go, but thank you so much for hanging out with us today, being a part of this. Thanks to all of you watching the Dulcimoon Talks. And what we have found with YouTube is that it may take a bit for comment things to come up, but check back later and see if there's any questions in the comments. And folks, of course, if you're watching this, feel free to drop questions or comments in the comment thread. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin. It's been
thank
great.
you. Bye, friends.
Bye.